go into the clinical topics proper for dermatology. Dermatology this week will include two topics. Those are bacterial infections of the skin and fungal infections, which are, I guess, the commonest presentation in our derma OPDs. After that, there will be parasitic infestations and viral infections. So from next week onwards, I guess we'll have 3 classes on dermatology per week. So let's start with the topic for today. Before going on to the topic proper, you should know what are the normal skin flora of your body. And the common ones are Propionibacterium apis, Corynebacterium species, Staphylococcus epidermidis, Staphylococcus aureus, Streptococcal species, Candida albicans, which is a yeast. Now, bacterial SSTIs, that is skin and soft tissue infections, range from very superficial infections to very life-threatening conditions by systemic or bloodstream spread. This is a very common problem encountered in our day-to-day OPD practice. I guess the majority of the patients belong to this group of infections. The risk factors for bacterial infections include trauma, poor personal hygiene, crowding, and other comorbidities which are already existing in an individual, like renal disease or heart disease, hypertension, diabetes, which will delay the treatment, the diagnosis, diagnostic picture becomes altered due to the existing comorbidities. Then also the risk factor includes a very close connection with a person already having a SSTI, venous stasis in a patient with varicose veins, lymphedema, and certain surgical procedures which decrease the mobility and thus reduces the venous return, as well as these decrease peripheral circulation in these patients. So most of the bacterial infections of the skin are managed on a regular OPD basis, but sometimes when there are severe infections, they require hospital admission also. Now, what are the etiologies? The most common bacterial SSTIs are caused by gram-positive organisms, which include Staph aureus and group A and group B streptococci. The other causes include gram-negative organisms like Haemophilus influenzae, diphtheroids, Vibrio species, Mycobacterium species, Pseudomonas, Aeromonas. These are the atypical organisms also come under it, and other anaerobes. So, bacterial infections are mostly caused by Staphylococcus and Streptococcus. Staph mostly affect the skin appendages, whereas Streptococcus, they tend to affect the various layers of the skin. Depending on the site of affection, the various conditions will be discussed in the following slides. When it affects the superficial epidermis, the condition is known as impetigo, which can be caused by both Staphylococcus as well as Streptococcus. If it affects the deeper layer of epidermis and some part of dermis, then the condition is known as ecthyma, which is a deeper skin infection. Then when there is affection of superficial layer of hair follicle, it is termed as folliculitis. When it affects the deeper layer of the hair follicle, it is called as boils or furuncle. And when various groups of hairs are clustered to be infected, it is called as carbuncle. Hidradenitis suppurativa is the blockage of the opening of the apocrine gland followed by infection. Then the common conditions due to streptococcal infections are impetigo, ecthyma, similar to Staphylococcus, along with when there is affection of the superficial layer of the dermis, it is termed as erysipelas. When the infection goes deeper down to the dermis, along with the superficial layer of the subcutis, it is termed as cellulitis. And a very deep layer of subcutis when involved, which leads to massive infection of the skin, is termed as necrotizing fasciitis. Intertrigo is a term. It is a skin infection which can be caused by both bacterial as well as fungal infections, fungal etiology actually. and it is mostly caused by Streptococcus, which occurs in between the skin folds of the body. Sorry. Now, Staphylococcus aureus, it is the most common cause of skin and soft tissue infection along with Streptococcus pyogenes, and most cases are now due to community-acquired methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus. Streptococcus pyogenes is also one of the common agents. The M protein in the Streptococcus is the main antiphagocytic virulence factor which inhibits activation of alternate complement pathway, which permits to avoid phagocytosis, causing destruction of polymorphonuclear leukocytes. Streptococcal pyogenic exotoxins A, B, and C act as superantigens which bind to MHC class II molecules and T cell receptors, promote T cell activation, secreting cytokines, which leads to severe hypotension and thus multi-organ failure associated with streptococcal toxic shock syndrome. Now coming to the topic proper, the first important bacterial infection which is very commonly seen is impetigo. This is a localized skin infection which is common in the preschoolers, more prevalent in the tropical regions, and thus it is more common or frequently seen in the summer season. The spread of infection is due to person-to-person transmission direct, or it can also occur as fomite transmission. The clinical infection becomes apparent approximately 10 days after colonization with the implicated bacteria. Now, there are two basic forms of impetigo, bullous and non-bullous. Non-bullous impetigo is the commoner form. It is mostly caused by Streptococcus pyogenes alone, or it can occur as a part of mixed infection with Staphylococcus too. The characteristic lesions are thin wall vesicles are present, which are generally not seen on the clinical examination with the patient presence in the OPD, because since they are very thin wall vesicles and the layer affected is the superficial layer of the epidermis, thus when the patient presents or the child presents, these vesicles have already ruptured, which leave behind the residual yellow crust, which are mostly seen on the face and extremities, especially in and around nose and oral cavity, as you can see in the previous picture. Right. So you can see this crusting. This is generally called as honeycomb crusting appearance. So lymphadenopathy is a common feature, as you know, because it is mostly seen in the children. These may colonize the nasopharyngeal cavity, leading to upper respiratory tract infections following the skin infection. So now coming to bullous impetigo, which is more common in newborn and childhood. It mostly affects the face. Bullae can persist for 2 or 3 days and can grow larger, or it can rupture, leading to exuding this thin brown crusting appearance. So ecthyma is the deeper infection of the skin, which is usually caused by Streptococcus infection. It involves epidermis and dermis. And since it involves the upper layer of the dermis, there is an equal chance of scarring, whereas there is no chance of scarring unless it is like scratched or excoriated in impetigo. But in ecthyma, even with natural resolution or with antibiotics, there is always a chance of scarring. It is commonly seen in the thighs and the legs. And one term is ecthyma gangrenosum, which is caused by Pseudomonas aeruginosa, and it is seen in immunocompromised individuals. Now coming to folliculitis. Folliculitis can be infectious, eosinophilic, and drug-related. The most common bacterial causes include Staph aureus, Streptococcus, Pseudomonas, Proteus species. And sometimes it can be due to fungus. Fungal related pityriasis folliculitis is also very commonly seen in the summer seasons, which mostly affects the upper back, chest, and it is very likely to resemble acne. So I think it will be dealt in your acne class. So infection generally follows the follicle damage. The presentation of folliculitis depends on the severity, which can range from very superficial inflammation to a deeper infection known as furuncle or boil. Two, clusters of coalescing abscesses found deeper in the subcutaneous tissues, that is carbuncles. Folliculitis is a clinical diagnosis. So this is a picture which shows folliculitis. There are groups of papules and crusts are seen in the abdominal region. The signs and symptoms of folliculitis include pruritus, papules, and pustule formation, which surrounds the hair follicle. Systemic signs such as fever and malaise are sometimes present, and it can indicate bacteremia if present. Now, this is a picture showing carbuncle, mostly caused by Staph aureus. This is a large picture showing large inflammatory plaque, which is studded with multiple small pustules. Some have ruptured and some are draining pus over here on the nape of the neck. This is a very painful area which is surrounded by erythema, edema due to surrounding inflammation, and this extends down the fascia. Okay. Now this picture shows furunculosis, where there is deeper infection of the hair follicle with surrounding erythema as well as edema. The boil is just about to rupture. Now there is another condition known as psychosis barbae, where it mostly affects the beard or the upper lip in the males usually. It consists of recurrent papules or pustules which are centered on a hair, which may coalesce to produce plaques which are studded with pustules. And this condition is generally confused with pseudopsychosis barbae, where due to the shaving of the hair turns upright down, and when there is constant pressure, it will lead to irritation leading to pseudopsychosis barbae. Here there is actual bacterial infection, where that is only a pseudo condition. Mimics psychosis barbae. The other condition is hidradenitis suppurativa, which is caused by an obstruction in the draining ducts of apocrine glands of the axilla and genitalia. It results in a tender nodular dilatation of the glands, as you can see in this picture. And the pool secretions will become secondarily infected with gram-positive and gram-negative bacteria, especially Staphylococcus, Streptococcus, bacteroids, E. coli, etc. The risk factors include hormonal factors as well as obesity. This is a very chronic and recurrent condition which is very difficult to treat, and the picture shows various sinus formation and diffuse scarring occurs eventually. So it requires sometimes requires multiple surgical drainage besides antibiotics. The repeated bouts of infection can lead to scarring and sinus tract formation of the affected area, which will complicate the long-term management of the disease. So I think hidradenitis suppurativa, some extra things will be covered in your acne class later on. Now coming to erysipelas. Erysipelas is an acute onset of skin erythema associated with fever and lymphangitis. It is commonly caused by Streptococcus pyogenes. The classic skin lesion is raised, well-demarcated erythematous bordered plaque, which is caused by prominent lymphatic compromise of the affected area and most often develops on the lower extremities and face. The predisposing factors are colonization of the skin or recent oropharyngeal infection to dermatophyte infection in between toes or toenails, and chronic venous stasis and pre-existing leg ulcers. There is a very superficial nature of the disease, and subsequent bacteremia is rarely found. Whereas cellulitis is a spreading infection of the epidermis and the subcutaneous tissue. Staphylococcal and streptococcal species are the most frequent isolates. The common findings include erythema, edema, warmth, and increasing tenderness of the affected area. The patient also have fever, tender lymphadenopathy, and abscess formation when the causative organism is Staph aureus. The involved area is very poorly demarcated as compared to erysipelas, where this picture shows this is a case of erysipelas, where the borders are very well demarcated, whereas the increasing diffuse erythema have no clear distinction of border, only a clear erythema and very subtle finding of increasing inflammation. The tenderness is diffusely present over the whole leg as compared to the clinical picture. Will differentiate your case of erysipelas from cellulitis. The causes include smoking, homelessness, obesity, venous stasis, untreated tinea, concomitant other extradermatitis, a history of cancer, or any immunocompromised condition of and a first episode of cellulitis over tibial region. Lymphedema has also been identified as a major risk factor for recurrent cellulitis. Now, one very important condition is staphylococcal scalded skin syndrome, which is generally preceded by Staphylococcus aureus infection. It occurs more commonly in newborn infants and sometimes in immunocompromised adults. It is caused by two epidermolytic toxins, ETA and ETB, produced by certain strains of Staphylococcus aureus. The toxins act exclusively on the stratum granulosum. There is no mucosal involvement, which is a very important differentiating feature, as this condition is very commonly confused with your drug eruption. The severe drug eruptions look exactly like Staphylococcus scalded syndrome, and lack of mucosal involvement will clearly distinguish this condition from the cases of drug reaction. Localized, there are two forms, localized and generalized. In localized, the toxin is found in the periphery of the wound, whereas in generalized form, the toxin spreads throughout the bloodstream. There is a diffuse rash present over the body, which progresses to gradual blister and bullae formation, followed by exfoliation of the affected skin. So also the child has, or the newborn has fever, lethargy, and there is a positive Nikolsky sign. So what is a Nikolsky sign? Nikolsky sign is the application of tangential pressure over the skin adjacent to the blister or bulla, which will result in the superficial peeling, very easy peeling of the skin. So the other very dangerous condition is necrotizing fasciitis, which is caused by a single organism like Streptococcus, Staphylococcus, or it can be polymicrobial due to mixed aerobic and anaerobic species. Vibrio species associated with seawater exposure can cause very severe infections in patients who have chronic liver disease or diabetes. Other factors predisposing are varicella infection, IV drug abuse, penetrating injuries, burns, childbirth, recent surgery, and muscle strain. The most commonly affected sites are the extremities. Extremes of age and IV drug abuse have a very poor prognosis. There is a very rapid progression of this condition within 24 to 48 hours. There are devastating consequences, namely destruction of fat, fascia, and the underlying muscle. There is diffuse swelling of the affected area with very ill demarcated borders, and what the patient tells is there is extreme pain which is out of proportion to the physical findings noted, which is followed by bulla and blister formation due to tissue ischemia from locally thrombosed blood vessels. Also, as there is infarction of superficial nerve, the area later gradually turned anesthetic. The skin turns violaceous or ecchymotic and thus becomes gangrenous if it is left just like that. Necrosis and ischemia will further block to the antibiotic delivery to the affected area. So it should be suspected in a patient who appears very toxic, who fails to respond to antibiotics and presents with skin necrosis which is proceeding. A finger test sometimes is done, which might be outdated nowadays, where an incision is made on the skin, which is down to the deep fascia, and a finger is generally used to dissect through the tissue planes. If minimal resistance is found during this process with a murky, very foul smelling fluid coming out, the test is considered to be positive. Now, the other condition is erythrasma, which mostly occurs in the intertriginous regions, like toes, in between the toes, armpits, groins, where the skin is adjacent to the other skin. It is caused by Corynebacterium minutissimum. You should know the causative organism, and it is commonly seen in diabetic patients as well as obese individuals. This is a mild, chronic, localized superficial infection of the skin, which have sharply defined irregular brown scaly patches. The wood slide examination, if done, will reveal a coral red fluorescence. The treatment is done with topical azole antifungals or topical antibiotics like fusidic acid. And sometimes when there is diffuse involvement, then oral erythromycin is helpful, is required. So we're coming nearly to the end of the class. Diagnosis, these are mostly diagnosed clinically. The cardinal signs of SSTI includes erythema, edema, tenderness, and increased warmth of the area. The signs such as fluctuance, crepitus, indiration, blisters, or bullae may help the clinician determine how deep is the infection or presence of an abscess. So a careful travel and environmental exposure history should also always be taken, as certain pathogens will come out from this history itself. So like Pseudomonas aeruginosa acquired from hot tubs, Vibrio vulnifucus and Mycobacterium marinum from water exposure history. So obtaining antibody serology for suspected streptococcal infection generally not helpful, as systemic antibody is not formed, but cultures of secretions which are draining from abscesses and other skin lesions like furuncles, carbuncles may assist in determining the causative organism. But generally, before starting the treatment, as a culture takes time, so the empiric treatment covering the common organism, depending on the clinical suspicion, is already started. But the antibiotics can later be changed or can be added depending on what the culture and sensitivity report shows. So the principles of therapy are: the milder infections can simply be managed by local cleaning as well as antibacterial, topical antibacterial creams or ointments. And only in the severe conditions, antibiotics are required. Sometimes cleaning with soap water and weak KMNO4 is very helpful as it has a very hygroscopic action, and it tends to shrink the wound. So the commonly used antibacterial creams or ointments prescribed nowadays, the newer antibacterials are piperacin, and the older ones are fusidic acid, but still commonly used. Nowadays, other topical antibiotics like neomycin are outdated, or neomycin are not used, as there is a chance of contact eczema and contact dermatitis with the use of neomycin. So superficial, same thing. Superficial infections do not require systemic treatment. Mild folliculitis can itself be treated with heat packs. In case of furuncles and carbuncles, sometimes incision and drainage is required. Extended spectrum penicillins are the choice of drug. Example, nafcillin, dicloxacillin, flucloxacillin, or first generation cephalosporins like epilexin, and the commonly used ones in our part of the world is cefadroxil, cefazolin, with or without the addition of an antibiotic which stops the toxin production like clindamycin, are examples of beta-lactam drugs that are effective against methicillin-sensitive Staph aureus and streptococci. So thank you.